Prime Minister, thank you for the privilege of being on board this ship. Let's talk defence. There's a report that you met with Lord Robertson, the former NATO Secretary-General, after John Healey rejected the initial findings of the SDR, the Strategic Defence Review. Can you tell us what was said at that meeting?
Well, the Strategic Defence Review is ongoing, so we're having regular meetings, as you would expect. The review is looking at the challenges and risks that we are facing at our capability and making sure that we're fit for service and fit for the future. So that's what the review won't report until into next year.
It's reported you've been told, or the defence chiefs say, they'll have to cut 20,000 troops from the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, or scrap 2 aircraft carriers. Which will it be?
Well, I think this is a leak, and with all leaks, they tend to be inaccurate. But the review is ongoing. There are ongoing discussions, as you would expect. And the final conclusions won't be until into the new year. But what I would say is this, that I absolutely understand that the first duty of all governments, including my government, is the safety and security of our people. That's why we put a lot of money in the budget, into the defence budget. And this strategic review is there to make sure we're fit for purpose and stronger in the future.
But that's twice you've referenced this treaty. You've already cancelled helicopters, tankers, amphibious assault ships. What's the purpose of the review if you've already taken those decisions?
Those decisions are decisions that had to be made given the, in most cases, the age of the equipment. We need to make sure that our service personnel have the best equipment available to them, and they were getting towards the end of their lives. So those were necessary decisions. But the strategic review is wider than that, if you like, which is to look at the overarching risks and challenges and to make sure that we're fit for the future. And that's the spirit in which it's being carried out.
When will we get to 2.5% of GDP?
We will set out a path to that in due course.
But why only a path, Prime Minister, now? You've been in opposition for long enough. You knew that was coming up. Why can't you give us a definitive date?
Well, the reason for that is, firstly, I do want the strategic review to report, because I think it's important that we understand what capability we need. And one of the issues we've been discussing with key NATO allies this morning is how we make those percentages work, because there is an ongoing discussion in Europe, as you will know, about defence spending and an acceptance that it needs to go up. But the discussion this morning was also about how do we do that jointly, make the most of the joint work that we do. And so all of that has to be taken into account, and that's why we'll set it out in due course.
Is 2.5% the summit of your ambition, or would you seek to go higher?
Well, at the moment, we're going to set out that pathway to 2.5, but there's a live discussion going on about
so you would seek we're talking in Estonia, whereas you'll be aware it's 3% here, and Russia's just 150 miles up the road. Would you seek to go to 3%?
Well, Nick, we've made that commitment that we will get to 2.5%. The discussion we had this morning is how do we make the defence spending of our NATO allies work best collectively? And there was a real sense around the table this morning that it's not about just what the contribution of each individual NATO country is. It's also about the joint work we do. I was in Norway earlier this week. We're doing a huge amount of important stuff in the high north, a huge amount of work on some of our vulnerabilities in relation to subsea infrastructure. And so, yes, there's a question of the percentage, which I accept we will set out that path to 2.5. But there is also the crucial question,
so you could
by
see
working together, can we make the most effective
You could see a position where you would get to 3%, possibly, in many years hence.
Well, the commitment we've made is to set out a path to 2.5%.
Okay. Donald Trump has been outspoken about NATO, and he's made it plain that he thinks countries should pay their way. You've made it plain you want to work with both Donald Trump and the European Union and NATO. Were he to go for a country such as Italy or Spain, who spend radically below 2%, who would you support, Trump or your NATO ally?
Well, both, and I want to work with both.
How could you do that?
Well, we're having constructive discussions with President-elect Trump. As you know, I met him a number of weeks ago and discussed a number of issues. I do think that when he says that Europe needs to do more as a general proposition, I think that's right, and we should do more. There's a huge amount of capability that we are doing together.
But everyone should pay their way, shouldn't they, Prime Minister?
Yes, and Europe, has to...
So what's your message to Italy, to Spain, to other countries that don't, to Belgium?
I'm not going to sit here in an interview and start telling allies
but they don't pay their dues,
what they must do. All of our allied countries make a huge contribution to our collective defence, and if Putin thought by his aggression in Ukraine that he was going to weaken NATO, he made a big mistake, because NATO is now stronger. We have extra members, and we are constantly working together, training together, deployed together. As I say, just up the coast here, we've got our troops embedded as part of our NATO.
Indeed. Well, tell us a little bit. We're on board HMS Iron Duke. Yeah. It's a frigate. What does that do? What do the troops that you've mixed with earlier to do? What do you understand their role as NATO with Russia so close?
Well, they've had a very busy year, deployed on a number of missions. I won't go into all of them, but it has included crucial stuff in relation to the work we have to do to defend Ukraine, the constant challenge of Russia. There's the shadow fleet, as you know, which we have to bear down on wherever it is, and they've been involved in some of that. And of course, they've been up in the high north as well. So I've had the opportunity to say thank you to them, because I can tell you at the NATO meeting this morning, the way in which we're responding to the challenge of Russia came up. And there was a real appreciation for what our teams are doing as part of that NATO deployment.
So it's crucial work, but as part of your cuts, you've already scrapped a frigate just like this. We go down from 8 to 7. If it's so crucial, why would you scrap one of these style frigates?
Well, I think if you talk to the crew here, they will tell you this frigate, this particular one, I think is now 33 years old. Yep. Its lifespan was intended to be 18 years, so they've nearly doubled it, and they're looking forward to some of the new equipment.
But we're going down in number prior to those new vessels coming on board, Prime Minister. We'll go down to 7. If they're so crucial, why would we do that when we haven't got the ready others standing by?
The crew here are very mindful of the fact this is now 33 years old, and they want to move on to the new equipment as soon as they can. But we don't do our service personnel any favours by using equipment that is, many years, in some cases, past its sell-by date.
Let's move on to other things. Personal popularity, you're down 34 points. How much does that worry you?
What worries me is, and what gets me out of bed every day, is how we deliver for those people who voted us in July to change the country for the better. How can we make them better off? How can I get those waiting lists down? Well, how can we make sure that every young person has the chance to go as far as their talent will take them? So they're the things that keep me awake. They're the things I get up for in the morning. And look, I will be judged at the next general election whether I've delivered. I'm very clear.
Well, you're being judged
that.
Currently by the ratings. I mean, you say what worries you and what gets you up is the people at home. You have been away 31 days since becoming Prime Minister. That's equivalent to 6 working weeks, or 1 in 5 days. People suggest you're the Prime Minister who's never there. Why do you travel so much?
Well, Nick, I travelled here today because our work with NATO is so important to our country. If you think about the impact that the conflict in Ukraine has had back at home on our country, it's been huge. If you think just for a moment, just bear with me, about the risks to the subsea infrastructure in Norway. We had a high-level briefing on the work we're doing in relation to the cabling and the pipelines that are under the sea and the risks. I have to make sure and be assured that we've got the capability to meet the risks to our country. But also, Nick, what I've been able to do is to make the case for Britain and the investment that's coming into our country. 63 billion came in our investment summit because we're out there making the case for our country. And therefore, there's a direct link between the work that we're doing internationally and the impact back at home. And it's very important that is done.
But while you're away, what is it the mice might play? There are suggestions that Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting were joking at a reception just a couple of weeks ago about trying to get your job. Do you feel confident in your post?
Those jokes have been going on since the very first day I was elected Labour leader.
What's it like to be a joke from day one?
Look, we are absolutely... We've got a huge and important majority in government. We've got a clear mandate for change. We're getting on and delivering that change. But I know it's got to be felt in the pockets of working people. They need to feel better off. That's what we're working on.
Well, we've had negative...
They need to see those waiting lists going down, which we're bearing down on. And we need to make sure
GDP negative for 2 months in a row, Prime Minister. Where's the growth?
Well, we need to go further. We've stabilised the economy with the budget, but that's not the limits of my ambition. I know we've got to do the tough stuff on planning. We've got to do the tough stuff on regulation. There's more that we need to do. And I want, but that growth, Nick, it can't just be a line on a chart. It needs to be felt in the pockets of working people. I want people at next election to say, I feel better off.
Right.
I know the health service is working properly now.